So please welcome first the chairman of the European Institute for Technology and Innovation, Dirk Jan van den Berg. Welcome, Dirk. You've had a fascinating insight, thanks to your role, into all the kinds of, many of the ideas that are percolating and coming up at the moment. I think it's 10 years now of the EIT. So what would you say has been learnt in that time? Because in terms of technological change, it is an age.
Well, I think in the first place, it's very important why the EIT has been originated. And that is the following situation. In Europe, we have an excellent education system. We have an excellent research system. We have excellent companies. And still we are lagging behind on this issue of innovation. And the whole idea of the EIT is not to think up new technologies just by itself, but making sure that you create the right processes to make innovation happen. And that is what the EIT does. It connects the dots. It connects the dots of education, research, and companies. It connects the dots of everything that is needed to have innovation flourish, to make it one-stop shop for innovation, so to speak. It's also very important that it creates the opportunity to link regions in Europe, because by now, in its 10 years of existence, the EIT operates 40 innovation hubs in Europe, all over Europe, which gives a tremendous opportunity to remedy the fragmentation that exists in Europe and to connect the different innovative zones in Europe.
But you don't have funding. Are you able to fund startups that come to you, or is it more that you're trying to connect them to others who can help get their ideas off the ground?
It's more subtle than that. There is funding, but the idea is that the knowledge and innovation communities that are organized around relevant themes, like climate, like energy, like digital, will be self-sustaining in terms of its operations within 15 years. So the KICs will have to operate as a sort of independent enterprise by themselves to make sure that they can continue their activities after these 15 years.
What are your observations then I mean, I imagine you get many more applications than projects you can support. Is that correct?
Well, the point is that we have from time to time a call focused on a particular theme, like we had in December on urban mobility and on manufacturing. And consortia will present their case, and one of these proposals will be selected. That's how it works. Of course, within the KIC, there will be, well, a lot of ideas, a lot of proposals, and they will have to manage that by themselves, which ideas will be taken on board and will be part of this ecosystem.
And where would you say, as you look across the span of things that come your way, where would you say the biggest stumbling blocks are? Is it where ideas haven't been sufficiently thought through, or is it that they come up against hurdles that could be dealt with the right sort of will?
Well, I think for the individual startup or scale-up, it is extremely important to be part of an ecosystem, to actually have an effective one-stop shop, like I just said. It's not just your idea, it's not just your technology, but it is about market assessment, it's about business development, it's about being mentored, it's about having access to human resources, it's about having access to finances, venture finances, whatever. And this is what we're actually trying to create in these knowledge and innovation communities, that's all there. And once these ingredients are put in place, then actually you can see success coming up. And we will have some very good examples of that here.
We're going to see 3 people come up on stage in just a moment.
In fact, you already have seen one this morning, the Lilium example on this flight service.
Yes.
And I think that is so very important to organize the ecosystem in which this can take place.
But then, and you said there were 40 innovation hubs.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that is the way it's going to stay, or do you think that, you know, in your ideal world, we would want some kind of European equivalent of Silicon Valley?
But you know, in Europe, we have many Silicon Valleys. I myself from the Netherlands. Take the western part of the Netherlands, and you project Silicon Valley on that particular part of the Netherlands. It is Silicon Valley. We have top universities, we have top people, we have top locations, we have top companies, it's all there. And I think it's a bit we are really, I would say, not self-confident enough in some way that we cannot simply see the treasures and the richness that we have in terms of research, higher education and good ideas and talent in Europe itself. We have our own Silicon Valleys. We might even have more Silicon Valleys.
Yes, but I'm wondering whether more is not necessarily, I mean, you raised the point about how that collaboration is really important, right? As you come into contact with other people who, may have a different idea, may challenge you. I mean, actually, perhaps we're losing something by having so many of them. Silicon Valley has been successful because partly because so many ideas found common cause there.
Yeah. Well, that's quite true. It's a very concentrated area. You have around Boston a concentrated area. You have around London a concentrated area. But in other parts of Europe, you have concentrated areas as well. And we should simply recognize that more.
And shout about it more. Maybe it goes back to what we heard earlier about the need not, yes, and perhaps less European modesty.
Yeah.
Then what would you say then to, whether it's European leadership level or national government level, how can they best help, facilitate and support this sort of work?
Well, of course, I'm always polite when it is about governments. But I think it's not just government policy that will do the trick. This is about a more general attitude in Europe, not just governments, but also industries and companies. And I think some of the important points already came up this morning. It's about openness, being ready to engage in the world, not being afraid of China, but engage with China. I mean, that's the only way to come over your fears, probably, I don't know. And then, of course, speed is of extreme importance. This is about digitization. This is about speed. So we need to be much more responsive to what's happening. And then we need much more dare. Simply do it and see what happens, and you will learn from it, and you will have a better go in the second try. And I think these are the elements that are really missing, because we have a sort of caring state concept in Europe that makes us totally risk averse. And these are times of change, and that means that you have to include risk in your calculations, and that you have to dare, and that you have to be speedy, and that you have to be open to what's happening.
There was a finding from the Tech Divide study that suggested people perceived European governments as not being that willing or able to drive technological change. Is that a correct assumption?
I would say it's not entirely fair to put it that way, but I think it's a simple statement of fact that the innovation cycles do not coincide with political cycles. And that is where the problem is. Every government wants to formulate its own government policy on innovation. But that's not how innovation works. Innovation takes time. And, well, regularly, the lead times in innovation are actually quite long. You're talking about 8 years, 10 years, easily. And therefore, it's so important that once you have formulated the policy, you stick to it. And we also need, predictable, steadfast policies to make sure that you create the environment in which innovation can take place.
And I suppose ideally that the next government sticks to it, if that next government is not
that would
yours.
be a major improvement.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Dirk. We are going to now. Dirk and I
would like to make one more point.
Go on, yes, because we're going to go on.
Yeah,
before we meet the 3 startups.
I noticed there's a lot of talk about education this morning, and of course this is all in the frame of getting the right people with the right skills and with the right education, which of course is totally good. But I think there's much more to that. We have to prepare whole generations to work in a digitized environment. People are totally not ready for that. And I think this makes it so very important to rethink curricula at schools in terms of digitization, because that is the world people are getting into. That is the world they will have to work with. And if we do not do that well, people tend to become a bit at a distance of what's happening there. And you will have a sort of dichotomy in your societies of the digital literates and the digital illiterates. Yeah. And that is something we should avoid at all costs, because otherwise we will not make progress.
Yes, I think we're going to be talking a lot more about education and skills later on. No, so it's very useful that you said that. Just a final thought. So the 3 startups who are going to take to the stage now are all ones that have been supported by the EIT?
Yes, hopefully they will tell that they have greatly
but the 3 of them represent, I think they're a representative sample of the projects you supported. Right, so, great. Well, I'm going to invite the 3 of you to come up on stage, and we look forward to hearing about about your work. Thank you.
It's 3 out of 1250.